Ow, it hurts. Help me. I can only whimper softly as I protect my aching back and legs. The moment I arrived at my apartment's parking lot, the car that had been parked in front of me suddenly sped towards me at a furious pace. Before I could dodge, the car hit me, and a loud thud echoed throughout the parking lot. I hit the asphalt hard with my back and butt, and as I was enduring that pain, I squinted due to the pain in my thigh. Perhaps I got a cut from the fall. Blood was steadily oozing from my thigh. Everything went white before my eyes, but I heard the car door open. Out from the passenger side stepped my husband. "Oh, it's you." I called out to my husband with a trembling voice, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Walking to the front of the car, my husband's gaze was fixed solely on the front bumper that had hit me. My husband carefully examined the car from every angle, not responding at all, no matter how much I called out to him. When he finally seemed to snap out of it, he looked to the driver's seat with a gentle smile and said, "There's no damage to the car. Are you okay, Mom?" That was a shock, wasn't it? It seemed that to Bob, his pale-faced mother-in-law in the driver's seat was more important than me, leading right in front of him. Rage surged from deep within me, and after that. "My name is Catherine. I'm a 25-year-old office worker. I moved from a remote island in Hawaii to a university in New York, and landed a job near the university right after. I started dating a salesman, Dave, who came to our company, and we just got married a month ago. Catherine, even if you're gonna continue working, where should we live? Maybe we should consider buying a house soon. Why don't we rent an apartment for now? We can look for a place and discuss what kind of house to build later. But I also want to live in our own house someday, so let's start saving up," I replied. Just talking about the future made us happy. Dave was an only child. His family consisted of just my mother-in-law. A few years ago, his father passed away, leaving Dave and my mother-in-law. Soon to be married, we had been looking at various rental properties. But one day, my mother-in-law suggested that we live with her. While I was hesitant about living together so soon after getting married, Dave quickly assured my mother-in-law that we wouldn't. Instead, he mentioned that he didn't want to leave my mother-in-law alone, so he suggested renting a place close to my in-laws' house. I thought it was better than living together, so I agreed. We decided to rent an apartment within walking distance from my in-laws' house in Nebraska. Catherine, thank you so much. I'm so glad to have both of you nearby. After your father-in-law passed away, it was just me and Dave. If Dave had left too, I would have been scared. So, thank you truly. Thank you too. I'm glad to have you close by, mother-in-law. And this dinner is so delicious, thank you. It's no problem, darling. Cooking in big batches always tastes better, so don't mention it. Since we were in walking distance, my mother-in-law often checked on us. Both of us were working full-time, and when our busy periods overlapped, we'd get home late. Knowing this, she would bring over a home-cooked meal once a week. Honestly, we usually come home late during our busy times, so having my mother-in-law's cooked dinner was a lifesaver. My mother-in-law is a kind and wonderful person. I felt lucky to have found such a loving partner. My own mother had always been delighted with my husband and mother-in-law, saying they were wonderful people since our marriage introduction. My husband and I continued to enjoy our married life, always getting along. On weekends, we often went for drives. My husband loves cars, and he drives a big right-hand drive vehicle. You really love cars, don't you, Dave? I've never met anyone who loved cars as much as you do. Really? My car's always clean, right? I think I gotta keep it clean, especially when I'm driving you around, Catherine. Just like my husband says, riding in a clean car does feel good. I loved these moments with my husband. I believed that this happiness would last forever. However, I started feeling that our days might be disrupted about a month after our marriage. Mom, stop it. I'm not a kid. I can eat on my own. But, look, what if you hurt your hand? You work on the computer, so it's a no-no. I can manage. Catherine's here too. It's okay. I've always helped you like this, right? Let me do it for you. That day, my mother-in-law came to our place with crab. My mother-in-law carefully removed the crab meat and handed it to my husband. I watched this scene from the kitchen, finding it odd. My husband's the same age as me. He can eat crab on his own, and even if he works with computers, he's more of a salesperson who travels, so it's not a critical issue. When he ate crab with me, he peeled it and ate by himself without getting hurt. Dave, look at this piece. It's loaded with meat. Here, open up. It's okay. I can eat by myself. Just drop it, okay? My mother-in-law was snugly feeding him crab right next to my husband. Honestly, I thought he could eat it even if she wasn't that close to him. Starting that day, I began to notice how close my husband was to my mother-in-law. After feeling that way, I started to be bothered by every little thing. Today, I'm gonna drop Mom off at her class. Wait, what? Weren't we gonna go to a movie this evening? I even bought the tickets. I'm sorry. The movie will probably be out on DVD soon, so we can watch it then. Since we already bought the tickets, just go see it by yourself today. It might not be to the point where he's a mama's boy, but for some reason, my husband always listens to what my mother-in-law says. A little while ago, my mother-in-law suddenly called in the evening saying she wanted sushi. That day, we had planned to go out for a barbecue. We were just about to leave the house when she called. I thought maybe we'd all go to the sushi place together, but my husband just told me, sorry. Go have a dinner by yourself, and left to meet my mother-in-law. When I confronted my husband after he returned home, he just said he'd be careful next time. But he never changed. Whenever there was a clash between something I wanted and what my mother-in-law wanted, for some reason, he always prioritized my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law just took it for granted. In fact, my mother-in-law tried to stay close to my husband as much as possible. It seemed like it was my husband's idea, but my mother-in-law started delivering dinner to our place and often stayed to eat with us. This became a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, routine. Even if I kept refusing, thinking it would be too much of a burden on my mother-in-law, she just brushed it off with "I live close by, so it's okay." On top of that, she would invite us over to my in-laws' home for tea or meals during the weekends. Naturally, our alone time as a couple dwindled, and I couldn't find time to do house chores over the weekend. If I suggested my husband go alone, my mother-in-law'd strongly request that I come along too. Whether she came to our place or we were called to my in-laws, it was always the same. My mother-in-law started criticizing me for not doing enough around the house. "Catherine, I know you both work, but you need to prepare a decent dinner. Relying solely on takeout is just not how a housewife should be. Excuse me, when I get home late, it's been arranged for Dave to buy his favorite takeout. What on earth is that? Not only do you barely cook, but you're letting your husband do the grocery shopping for dinner? Can't believe it. Do you even realize how busy Dave is? You're his wife, you should be thinking about your family's nutrition and at least preparing meals." Upon hearing my words, my mother-in-law's eyes widened in surprise. The older woman crossed her arms, looking up at me, and began to speak in a firm tone. "Honestly, I'm the one making most of your dinners, ain't I? I thought maybe once a week because of being busy, but now it's twice, sometimes even 3 times. Plus, you eat at our place on weekends. You hardly ever have the chance to make dinner yourself. Everyone's busy, you can't just use that as an excuse all the time." I couldn't hide her sigh at my mother-in-law's words. Who did she think was to blame for the reduced time to prepare dinner? The unsolicited meals, despite numerous refusals, were always pushed onto them by my mother-in-law. As I was about to retort, my husband stepped in front of me. And he gave me a stern look. "That's right, Catherine. Mom's cooking is delicious, but you can't always take advantage of it. It's too much of a burden on her. And, only eating takeout ain't healthy. You gotta start making some homemade meals from time to time." Well said, Dave. After all, in a marriage, the husband really needs to keep his wife in line, doesn't he? But Dave, it's not that your mom doesn't like cooking. I know, Mom. Your home-cooked meals are my favorite. And then, my mother-in-law and my husband seemed to create a world of just the two of them. They didn't notice that I was saying nothing, nor the cold stare I was giving them. Catherine's young, so I get it. Even if she had time, I doubt she could whip up a tasty meal. Probably some overseasoned dish without giving much thought to nutrition. Exactly. Catherine loves barbecue, so there are a lot of meat dishes. Plus, she's a bit naive about some things. Meat isn't the be-all and end-all. You gotta think about veggies too. Catherine's not quite there yet in terms of nutrition. She doesn't have the experience as a housewife like you do, Mom. My husband stated, joining my mother-in-law in belittling me. I mean, at this point, it seems ridiculous to even argue. If I just keep quiet and wish they'd hurry up and leave, they'd just gang up and ridicule me for being rude. But if I ignore even that, eventually, my satisfied mother-in-law will head back to my in-laws' house. As soon as my mother-in-law's gone, my husband starts playing games on his phone, and I confront him. Hey, what's the deal? You have her bring over food she wasn't even asked to make, then get mad at me for not cooking. I can't cook because she always brings over so much food. And you two keep harping about cooking and cleaning, but don't you realize that with her coming over so often, I don't have the time? If you want me to do these things, stop inviting her. If you prefer her company, why don't you just go live with her? At my words, my husband glances at me and smirks. What's the matter? Jealous? We've always been close, you know. People around town talk about how tight we are. Besides, if you learned from my mom, you'd get better at these things, right? Instead of telling her not to come, why don't you learn a thing or two? Excuse me? Taken aback by his nonsensical response, I was left speechless. Maybe he wasn't expecting a reply, because my husband's attention shifted back to his phone game. I could feel the weight in my heart. Dave was no longer the man I had once fallen in love with. After that, I began to stand up to my mother-in-law, even if it meant being disliked by her. Still, she'd often barge in, saying, "I'm here to teach you." Finally, at my wit's end, I didn't let my mother-in-law into the house when she arrived and told her bluntly that she was being a nuisance. My mother-in-law looked stunned but then shouted back in anger. After pushing her out the front door and closing it firmly, the next thing I knew, my husband came home and together they stormed into the living room, shouting and making a scene. That seemed to be the last straw. My mother-in-law even started interfering in my work. "Catherine, can't you cut back a bit on your work hours? The house isn't clean even during the weekdays. Shouldn't you be keeping it tidy?" Today is Dave's turn to tidy up. So, please tell Dave. How could you? Making your hardworking husband clean the house? I work outside too. We both work, so both of us should share household chores. Even though my mother-in-law understands the concept of both partners working, she firmly believes that household chores are the wife's responsibility. That's probably why she thinks I'm pushing those duties onto my husband. My mother-in-law sighed deeply, looking exasperated. "Catherine, there's a difference in income between you and Dave. Isn't it common for the one earning less, like you, to handle more household chores? If you can't handle that, maybe you should consider being a stay-at-home wife. Unfortunately, our incomes are nearly the same. Plus, on Dave's income alone, it's impossible for me to stay home. That's why I have to work too. We both work full-time and get home around the same time. Yet you expect only me to handle the chores? It's not about when you get home. You clearly lack respect and gratitude towards your hardworking husband." Without waiting for my retort, my mother-in-law dramatically waved her hand and let out another exasperated sigh. I wanted to retort that there was no gratitude or respect from my husband, but my mother-in-law wasn't even trying to listen to me anymore. Despite the ongoing conflict between my mother-in-law and me, my husband had never once listened to my side of the story. Instead, he teamed up with my mother-in-law, taking her side and blaming me. He stopped doing any chores around the house and started spending more time at my in-laws' home than at our own. Whenever I pointed this out, he'd lash out at me with incredible fury. So, I just let him go on like this. It was easier for me to let him spend time at my in-laws' house rather than being with him. Then, one day, I got off work early from a company nearby and was walking home. Just as I entered the apartment complex grounds. In the parking lot, it seemed my husband and my mother-in-law were about to head out, as our car was parked there. I didn't want to greet them and was about to walk past quickly when suddenly the car lurched forward, aiming straight for me. I tried to dodge, but the car was too fast, and it knocked me off my feet. Thankfully, my head was spared, but my leg throbbed with pain. It seemed I'd grazed my skin against the rough asphalt when I fell, causing a deep cut. Blood streamed from my thigh. As I wondered what to do, feeling faint from the blood loss, I heard the sound of a car door opening. Out stepped only my husband. He left the passenger door open and began inspecting the area of the car that likely hit me. He didn't even look at me. In the driver's seat, with a pale face, sat my mother-in-law, who made no move to get out. "Hey!" I called out to my husband, who was still inspecting the front bumper. Finally, he stood up. Still bleeding, I thought I needed to get to a hospital, but my husband turned away, walking toward the driver's side. "The car's fine, not a scratch." "Mom, you okay? Must have been a shock, right? You good?" I was dumbfounded. Here I was, bleeding in front of him, and all he cared about was the car and my mother-in-law. At my mother-in-law's reassurance, my husband smiled warmly, about to get back into the car, when finally, my husband looked at me. "Hey, don't just sit in the middle of the road. You're blocking cars, you know?" My husband didn't even show concern for me, and his careless remark made my anger explode. "Are you kidding me? You hit someone with your car and then talk to me like that? It's you who's messing around. You suddenly jumped out, and that's why I hit you. Then you blame my mom. By the way, what were you gonna do if the car got damaged?" At this point, I couldn't believe my husband was the same man I knew. He hits someone, causes injury, and then says it's the victim's fault. Without a word of concern, my husband gestured widely, signaling for me to move to the side of the road. "Worried about the car after seeing someone bleed? You saw me right in front of you, didn't you? It's on you for speeding into me. Who floors it in a parking lot anyway? What if it was someone else? Would you say the same? Huh? You're not a stranger. You're family. You get that if I hit you, I'm the one paying for the repairs? Hitting you doesn't benefit me a dime. You get that? What do you mean it doesn't benefit you? You were the one who hit me. Why am I the one being blamed?" As my husband and I argued, my mother-in-law, who had been in the driver's seat, finally got out of the car. My mother-in-law approached me, standing tall, looking down at me. "Catherine, do you know how much Dave's car costs? You come charging in and then have the nerve to speak like this. You should be apologizing first." I was completely dumbfounded, realizing firsthand what that expression meant. Even though she was the one who floored the gas pedal, causing the car to speed up, for some reason, my mother-in-law seemed to believe that I was the one who ran into them. "Why are you playing the victim? This happened because you weren't walking at the edge. Just like Dave said, this is on you." "That's right. It's on Catherine. Just go home and take care of the house. That's all you're good for now." I was at a loss for words. Both my mother-in-law and my husband insisted I had run into them at full speed. My head was spinning from their outrageous claims. Seeing me stunned, my husband forcefully dragged me to the side of the road. Ignoring my groans of pain, he just drove off. Soon after, someone rushed to my side. "Are you okay? I've called the police. Let's get you to a hospital." The person comforting me was a colleague who lived in the same apartment complex. I remembered she was off today, and while thinking about borrowing a towel or something because of the mess, my head started to spin again. Apparently, I had lost too much blood. I realized what had happened when I was getting treated in the hospital and recounted the events to the doctors. They told me I needed to be hospitalized for a few days, but I wasn't prepared for this at all. I wasn't sure if my husband was home to bring me things from our place. I didn't really want to rely on him even if he was there. Luckily, there was a gift shop in the hospital, so I asked the nurse to get the essentials for me. The moment I finished calling my company and expressing my gratitude to the colleague who had brought me there, my freshly turned off smartphone vibrated. It was a call from my husband. I hadn't planned on answering, but I accidentally tapped to answer since I had just been on a call with my colleague. I could hear my husband's voice. "You finally answered. My mom's in a bad situation because of you, and you dare to ignore calls from the family? What? Who are you? There's no hit-and-run driver in my family." I replied firmly to my husband's accusation. "What? You two think my mom did a hit-and-run? Everyone in the neighborhood's talking about how my mom hit someone and fled. The cops might come. You reported it, didn't you? Apologize to them and to my mom. It was a misunderstanding. She hit someone and drove away, that's hit and run. And for the record, I didn't report it." When I told my agitated husband that it was my colleague who called the police after taking me to the hospital, I heard a faint click of his tongue. "Just clear it up with the police and it'll all be fine. Hurry up and get here. I gotta stay in the hospital. And weren't you sitting in the passenger seat? Do you really think I just randomly walked into the car and fell? My husband's playing the victim comment pushed me to respond, and my husband paused for a moment. But then he began talking to me in a condescending tone. Listen, Catherine. If everyone thinks my mom hit you by mistake, how do you think she'd feel? She might get so scared she won't drive again. That's just sad. I don't get what you're saying. I'd prefer someone who drives that dangerously to not drive at all. Why were you being like this? If you just tell the police you weren't looking either, it'll all work out. Don't families help each other out when things get tough? His annoying tone made me sigh deeply. What you call family and what I call family seem different. When I'm discharged, I'll be sending you divorce papers. The police want my statement too, so I'm gonna hang up. Whoa, why are we talking divorce over something between my mom and you? Unable to bear his words, I hung up. To calm my boiling rage, I took several deep breaths. And as I planned my next steps, I decided to go back to my parents' house. To get to my parents' house, which is similar to an island off the coast of Maine, you have to take a plane and a ferry. Although it's far and challenging to get there, I couldn't hesitate any longer. I had always planned and prepared for the divorce, so packing up my belongings wasn't an issue. I handed the keys to my house to my mother, who had come to the hospital room. If she could take out the belongings I'd already packed during the weekdays, it would be all good. During that time, the police came and questioned me. Apparently, after receiving the report, the apartment management company checked the parking lot security cameras and saw footage of me being hit. With the evidence, they said it would lead to the arrest of my mother-in-law, which was a relief. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, my mother-in-law had been arrested by the police. I heard that when the police went to question her at my in-laws' house, she tried to escape by pushing a police officer away. She was easily caught, and due to the risk of her fleeing, she was promptly placed into a patrol car. As for me, I didn't return home. Instead, I headed to my parents' house with the belongings my mother brought out. I had to quit my job, but I left in high spirits, planning to look for a new job in the city. Perhaps one reason for my positive mood was that, when I went to my workplace to apologize and say goodbye, they kindly saw me off. A few more days passed. Through my lawyer, I demanded a divorce from my husband, but he vehemently refused. What's more, he actually showed up at my parents' house in Nebraska. At the front door, my parents were holding my husband back. My husband kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, but there's already evidence, and there's no way my mother-in-law's crimes would just vanish now. My husband kept saying family over and over again, which made my father lose his temper and angrily slammed the front door shut. You damn fool! Don't you ever dare call my daughter a family again! Get the hell out of here! Through the window, I could see my husband still trying to force open the door. Suddenly, my husband turned around. There stood some of the island's most intimidating and well-built uncles, staring at my husband with stern eyes. Seeing the looming figures approaching, my husband jumped and hurriedly ran towards the dock. He's probably waiting anxiously for the next ferry by now. Afterward, my husband and I managed to get our divorce finalized. Turns out, the hit-and-run investigation wasn't only about my mother-in-law, who was driving, but my husband, who was in the car with her. Unlike my mother-in-law who was arrested while trying to flee from the police, my husband didn't try to run and was cooperative during the investigation. So, they went with a home investigation approach, which meant he wasn't detained by the police. However, since he left home, even if it was just a plane and a ferry ride away, he was considered a flight risk and was detained, just like my mother-in-law. It seemed like he wanted to show some sign of remorse by agreeing to my divorce request. But if we're gonna get the divorce finalized, I honestly didn't care about his feelings anymore. The colleague who told me all this also informed me that my husband and my mother-in-law became the hottest gossip in the neighborhood. Phrases like the jerk who's more worried about his hit-and-run mom than his injured wife, or the lowest of the low, a mother-son hit-and-run duo, or like mother, like son, both got arrested were the talk of the town. Since it became challenging to contact my husband and my mother-in-law, I had no choice but to rely on a lawyer. But I never wanted to see their faces again, so it's no big deal. Moving forward, there's gonna be a lot of back and forth with my husband and my mother-in-law's insurance company, police investigations, and deciding whether or not to press charges. I just hope to settle everything quickly and never have to be in touch with them again.